Today we're going to talk about all-in-one liquid fertilizers. So whether that's Aquarium Co-op Easy Green, Brightwell, Florin, NilocG, Tropica, Seachem Flourish, there's a ton of them. I know I'm not covering them all. We're going to talk about what makes them great and kind of where they fall down a little bit and where you can run into problems using just an all-in-one fertilizer. So stay tuned. This is Fertilizer 101. Hello everyone, this is Bentley, and today we're going to take the third step in the Fertilizer 101 series. So, in episode 1, we talked about the basics, kind of a brief overview, the 3 different types of delivery methods, and a little bit about macro and micronutrients. In episode 2, we went really deep on macro and micronutrients, explained what each one of those nutrients, at least the ones found in fertilizer, do for us, and how to spot when we're deficient in them by looking at our plants and seeing those plant deficiencies so we know how to fix them by dosing specific nutrients. For the third episode, we're going to go a little more in depth on those delivery methods, and that's with probably the most popular type of fertilizer out there. And that's a liquid all-in-one. Now in my hands I have Brightwell's Florin Multi and Aquarium Co-op's Easy Green. This is by no means a review of these individual products. These just happen to be the 2 I have on hand. There's a ton of different ones, whether that's NilocG Thrive, Dustin's Grow Juice, Seachem Flourish, Tropica, ADA, Dennerlay. There are a ton of liquid fertilizers. And it's not specifically any one brand we want to talk about. It's about the overalls of using any of these kind of fertilizers, where they're good, and where we can start encountering some problems. So let's first talk about the pros of using a liquid like this. For the most part, we're going to get liquid fertilizers like this bottle of Easy Green, and they're going to have a nice little pump head, and they're going to be set to a specific dose. It's usually like a pump per 10 or 20 gallons, something really simple. Sometimes you'll get one like this Brightwell that doesn't have a pump head, but usually pump heads are also offered to make it simple. Now some of the lines, Seachem Flourish is probably the biggest offender of this, don't offer a pump head in a way to easily dose their liquid, and that's where I think those kind of lines fall down. But otherwise, much like Aquarium Co-op's naming scheme, all-in-ones are easy. It is something that we can very simply dose to cover all of our macro and micronutrients. Now, what's really important? On any given one, if we go over, say, to here, you're usually going to have a guaranteed analysis. And you can't read this, but basically what it's going to tell you is by percentage, the total amount of each of the macro and micronutrients present in the fertilizer. Now, one thing that's key to note here is that there are a few extra things that are going to be in your liquid fertilizers. Usually it's a stabilizing compound because certain macro and micronutrients can interfere with each other without those stabilizers. And that just helps keep these fertilizers going for a long time, because otherwise when you mix a fertilizer from a powder into a solution, typically they only last a couple of weeks to a month before they start to go bad. So those stabilizers help our all-in-ones last a lot longer. So it's something like this bottle of Easy Green or my bottle of Florin Multi, Dustin's Grow Juice, pick whichever one you're using. Again, this is not as specific to one brand. Keeps for a long time, so if we were only dosing, say, 1 10-gallon tank, we wouldn't worry about this stuff going bad because it's going to treat thousands of gallons over a long period of time. Beyond the fact that this is a simple all-in-one solution where it has everything we need in one convenient little bottle, what are the other positives? Typically, most of our all-in-one fertilizers only have to be dosed once a week. Sometimes twice a week if we're doing a little bit more, like maybe we're adding a little bit of CO2 or we have a little higher light or some higher demand plants. We'll add those fertilizers once or twice a week. But if you were to ask me, I would say you should dose every day and in a smaller amount. This can be left up to debate, as most of the manufacturers of these products typically suggest once a week or twice a week dosing. Each one has its own suggestion. But in general, I'll give this example. If I was dosing a 40-gallon tank, like the Plants for Profit tank behind me, that has a little bit of CO2 or highlight, maybe even both, instead of doing 2 days where I do 4 pumps, in the case of like Easy Green where it's 1 pump per 10 gallons, equate it however you will, right? But instead of doing 2 big doses that fill the maximum amount, I'm going to split that up instead and do a smaller dose, say like in the case of that 1 pump per 10 gallons, I'm going to do 1 pump a day. And I'm just going to, right before I feed my fish, 1 little pump of fertilizer, give that 30 seconds or so to mix in the water, feed my fish, call it a day. And the reason why I generally suggest this is because it's a continuous source of nutrients in the water instead of a big spike, then they get slowly absorbed. A big spike, then they get slowly absorbed. This is really just for the purposes of having continuous healthy growth in our plants and fighting off algae. But this is not necessary. Most of them are formulated to be dosed once a week, maybe even twice a week, and then, of course, counting for your water change to remove any excess nutrients that might be there if your plants are, say, very low demand, like Anubias, Java Fern, and similar epiphyte plants like that. The other major positive to our liquids is it's done for us. It's really no nonsense. They almost always have a simple dosing regime, and you're just done. It's really great for beginners because you don't have to think very hard. You just have to look at it and go, okay, I have this many gallons of water. I dose it like this. Now, the pitfall to this is that when your tank gets really overgrown like this thing behind me, you have so much plant life in there that rule kind of goes out the window, and you actually need to dose a lot more than what is being suggested. So going back to that example where I said that I would only dose 1 pump a day, in the case of this tank, I have to dose 2, sometimes even 3 pumps a day, because there's just so much plant life in this tank, and there's CO2, and there's really good light, plus it gets sunlight from the window, so it's just sucking those nutrients up. It needs a little bit more. But that's a part of experience. That is not necessarily understood or easy to understand by a beginner. So despite the fact that all-in-one fertilizers are really beginner-friendly, you can run into issues where it seems like there's not enough happening, and this is where the biggest con of an all-in-one fertilizer comes in. The big problem with all-in-one fertilizers is when we start seeing deficiencies. Let's say that we're low on iron. Well, we have 2 options. We either dose more of our all-in-one fertilizer and we overdose everything else, or now we have to go out and buy another product. So if I start getting low on iron or potassium, again, I'm using Brightwell just because this is what I have on hand. This is not specific to this line only. Seachem does the same thing where you can get a lot of the individuals in a liquid. All of a sudden, my all-in-one becomes something where I need a bunch of extra additives, and it's not as simple anymore because now I'm dosing, 1 day a week I dose a little extra potassium, and twice a week I'm dosing extra iron because I've got a bunch of red plants, and once a month I have to buffer the calcium in the water, so I add some crushed coral. You got stuff like this where like it starts getting a little more tedious, and it starts becoming closer to doing like estimated index style, more complicated fertilizer regimes. Now that being said, how often does this happen? Typically only when you're in a setup like the one behind me, where you start running CO2 and highlight and all that kind of stuff. And that's where you start seeing some of these things happen. In most of those cases, you probably should be looking at a different fertilizer method anyway, but maybe you're lazy like me and you just use an all-in-one anyway, and you overdose and you don't care. Which, for the most part, you can safely do every once in a while as long as you monitor your tank and pay attention to what it can and can't handle. The easiest way to do this is by testing your nitrates. Get a good nitrate tester. Make sure that you get somewhere between, I would typically suggest 10 and 20 parts per million, no more than 40. If you start getting over 40, we're going to start worrying about doing harm to our fish or our shrimp. 20 to 40 is an okay range. 10 to 20 is a little more optimal. Somewhere kind of in between, because, those liquid test kits can sometimes be hard to read. Perfectly fine. And what we want to do is try to maintain that in a healthy, established tank. Now, if our tank is brand new, we're probably shooting for the most part for zeros across the board for a little while and slowly getting that tank to settle in, and then worrying about seeing 5 to 10 or 10 to 20 or 20 to 40 nitrates kind of consistently whenever we test, as long as it's not right after we did a water change. You're probably asking yourself, Bentley, why would I choose anything other than an all-in-one? It's so easy. Why look elsewhere? And the answer to that is pretty simple. You don't have to. I am a firm believer of using all-in-ones. Now, this is an opinion. Keep this in mind. I can't back this up with like big science charts or anything crazy, but you can see this tank behind me. I get plants that are growing emergent. I get flowers. If we zoom in, we would see flowers on some of these plants. I get lush growth, so much that sometimes my fish start losing room to swim. And as long as I maintain that, I can keep it, not this overgrown mess. But this is all done with an all-in-one fertilizer, and I'm not dosing anything extra. I'm not dosing extra potassium or anything like that. Every once in a while, I dose a little bit of extra iron, and that's only because there's a bunch of red plants in here, and I want to get that color a little more intense, but it's not necessary. I can do this just with an all-in-one fertilizer, dosing every day or twice a week, because this has CO2 twice a week. In my low-tech tanks, I dose all-in-ones very frequently, twice a week in a smaller dose. So if it's, let's say my 90-gallon tank that has the rainbows and the swords, I will dose a liquid fertilizer in that tank twice a week, and I'll do about 5 pumps, 6 pumps. If it's right after a water change, I'll do the full 9, and then a few days later, I'll do like 4 pumps, 5 pumps. And I just kind of watch my plants, and it tells me if I've got not enough or I'm doing fine. It's all about understanding long-term your plant health. And that's kind of the game of this, is that the better you get understanding how your plants are doing, the easier it is to use something like just an all-in-one fertilizer, and it covers all your bases. Now, why would you choose something other than an all-in-one fertilizer? If you're in a specific area, say you have really hard water, so you have all sorts of those trace minerals already built in, you have lots of phosphates or what have you naturally in your water, and you really only need nitrogen. Or maybe your water out of the tap already has 20 parts per million nitrogen, so you don't need to keep dosing a lot of nitrogen. Now you might start looking at individual nutrients and changing those doses so that you're covering the things that aren't naturally in your water, so that your plants stay healthy, but you're not overdosing certain things. These are kind of niche cases. For you folks that are in like the Midwest where you're living on liquid rock, this might be more applicable to you, and you might start looking at something like doing the estimated index or powdered fertilizer and mixing your own liquid solutions. Or the other case is if you have purely a lot of root feeders and you want something that you can just set and forget for a month, you might start looking at root tabs. Generally speaking, all plants will feed a little bit from their roots and a little bit from the water column in some level of mixture. So you don't have to have root tabs for heavy root feeders and liquids for only water column feeders. You can have one or the other and be successful. In general, though, if you dose the water column, you're going to be pretty safe with pretty much any plant. So that's where some of the biggest benefits for all-in-ones come into play. They're simple, they dose the water column, and they handle kind of everything. But that being said, when we start running into problems, that's where that kind of everything might become a problem, because you start overdosing certain things, trying to account for it, or you end up with, this. An armful of different bottles, each one treats a different thing, and this is only half your shelf because you've got more back there, and you've got like Flourish Excel, and some potassium, and some phosphate, and this, and that, and this, and that, and you got some Flourish Trace, and you got a little bit of this, and you got your all-in-one Easy Green, and you... Oh man, it becomes a little crazy. that's an extreme case. And usually for most people, once they figure out an all-in-one that works for them, and I've seen lots of feedback like, I get too much algae when I use this product, and I don't get it when I use this product. They're all very similar, but there are small differences in the amounts of whether that's nitrates, calcium, whatever, in each of those fertilizers. So don't be afraid to try multiple types if you're seeing issues. Let's say that you bought Dustin's Grow Juice and you're seeing lots of hair algae all of a sudden, and you previously have been using Seachem Flourish, or maybe you're using Seachem Flourish and you're seeing all sorts of problems, and you switch to Aquarium Co-Op's Easy Green, and all of a sudden everything looks lush and beautiful. Pick the one that works the best for you. Don't buy into one person telling you, this is the best fertilizer ever. They're all kind of the same. That being said, everyone has a slight difference and might fit a different person's needs better than it fits yours. I know that in my case, I've tried certain ones that I can't stand because I have problems with them. And there are other ones that I've tried that I absolutely will evangelize because I've never had issues with them and I love them to death. That's a different video. In summary, let's talk about the key points that we covered. Number 1, all-in-one fertilizers are great if you want something simple, beginner-friendly, easy to use, and most importantly, you don't want to waste a lot of time mixing your own stuff. Where all-in-ones can have some problems, I didn't cover this, but they can be a little expensive, and more importantly, when you do start running into problems, you often will find yourself buying several little things to correct the problem, and now all of a sudden you have a bunch of stuff instead of just that one thing. With all that being said, I still think all-in-one fertilizers are really good for most beginners, and even some experts, but it's all about what works best for you. So, what I'd like to know down in the comments, if you use an all-in-one fertilizer, which one do you use, and have you tried other ones? Which ones have you had problems with? Which ones do you do well with? I've had lots of comments where like, I love Easy Green, or I love NilocG Thrive, or etc., etc. Just keep in mind, this is not in any way a review of specific products. I'm just using the ones that either I've tried or I have on hand. The difference is so minuscule that it very rarely matters until it gets to each person's local water. That's really what it comes down to. If you've enjoyed this series so far, give me a thumbs up. It really helps with the YouTube magic algorithms to help. Or consider sharing this video. Maybe you've got a friend who's just getting into planted tanks and they really want to understand what they need to do when it comes to fertilizer. Give a little share. Let them see the series. It'll help educate them on what is what. Maybe even come back and watch it a couple extra times if you need to. If you don't like me talking about fertilizer, or you think I'm shilling some specific product, you get hit thumbs down twice. I'll understand. If you're new to this channel and you want to keep watching more educational content like this, product reviews, some of the other things that we do, eventually we'll do another tour around the fish room and start talking about what's going on. Hit subscribe down below. Even ring that notification bell. That way you don't miss out on anything. And if you really, really enjoyed this, maybe consider hitting the join button down below, becoming a member, and getting a few extra perks. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. And stay awesome. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I'm actually in the process of testing a lot of the Brightwell Florin series. I've really enjoyed it so far. I've used Aquarium Co-Op's Easy Green and Easy Iron for 3.5 years now. 3 years. Yeah, three and a half years. I've been back in the hobby for 4 years. I've been using, I used Seachem stuff at first, and I hated doing the caps and stuff like that. And yes, I know there's better ways to do it, but that was when I was starting up, and I just didn't think intelligently. But needless to say, I've tried a lot of different stuff. I like certain things. I just want to give you a little ring into what I'm testing right now, which is the Brightwell line of stuff. So far, pretty nice, but I mean, like I said, liquid fertilizers are kind of all similar. There's just small differences, but I generally just appreciate the product as so far, it's giving me pretty good results in a tank that has a lot of root feeders and just still looks amazing despite that when it's only getting liquid fertilizer. Another thing for the Patreon and members who are at the shout-out size, which is to say the rainbow fish. I originally called them like Bozemanii, but I renamed them because I wanted them a little more simplistic. I think I called them Bozemanii in the last video. But still, Cody, Robert the Butcher, Ginger Graves, Preston John. You guys are some of the amazing folks, and your names are popping up, stuff like that. But those are the ones that have been doing it the longest. Just thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. It allows me to do stuff like this and put together steadily increasing videos of different education, as well as work on some other projects that you've seen a little bit of spoilers on. I think pretty soon we're going to have to talk dogs on my fish channel, because Papalimo's grown a lot, and I think you guys need to see him, because he's been a very loud boy. He actually had to put him in the kennel so he'd be quiet so I could do this video. But yeah, I'm just rambling on. Thank you so much for your guys' support. I really appreciate it. I really hope for those of you who happen to be watching this far, and maybe you aren't a member, consider becoming a member. And if it's not at like the bigger levels where you get shout outs and stuff like that, just consider the level that gets you access to the Discord. I've got a member who very recently joined. He'd sent me an email. I answered some questions for him. He decided to join. And then now he's been able to ask me direct questions on Discord, because there's not a lot of people there. My Discord's kind of quiet, which means you kind of get some direct access to me when I can answer stuff in a easier format than maybe email, or just something a little more private where some other really smart people can help at the same time. As always, guys, thank you so much for your patronage, for helping out, for watching, for sharing, or just listening to me ramble this long. Keep being the amazing people you are. Stay safe out there when human malware is going around. And stay awesome.